So you experienced the problem and it's like, I'm going to try to restate it to see if I got this. So it's that you're talking about, all the different account payable, and I'm not an accounts payable. I'm not an accountant,
you make good life choices. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we code? Like, what's the proper code? Like, what account do we put this bill under so that we are properly like understanding where our money is going out? When you're first starting, there's a way that you grow, and then there's how you're growing now. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about how you got your very first customers versus what you're doing now to get new people to become aware of Predict AP?
There are definitely use cases where AI cannot make that right choice, right? Brand new vendors, brand new situations, and vendors doing something tricky. When there's a nuance or there's not a pattern, right? And there's something to figure out or negotiate or settle. That's where people have an advantage that AI will never have. But what we're finding is it is a tool that augments staff so staff can do way more and expand back to that point of what do you want people doing? Expand into areas of more personal connection where there tends to be more value add as opposed to just data entry.
David, welcome to Product Growth Stories. So happy to have you on the show. So David, you're the CEO of Predict AP. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is and why did you build this product?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. So this is a product that came out of the real world business issue I had at Colony Capital. So Colony Capital is where I worked for the past 20 years. I was an accountant by background, a geek at heart, solving lots and lots of problems for a very large company. And one of those problems was paying bills. So big, people may not know, but big real estate companies paid lots and lots of bills, as you can imagine, lots of lawns to mow and windows to clean. And so the account payable space, there's lots of things around payment automation, workflow automation. And there's this part about like, where does it actually get coded and allocated? And so we went out in the market, found solutions on those other things. And then we had this woman, Krista, who had been at the company for 30 years. She ran our AP department. Everything was working well until Krista retired, and the $60 billion A company couldn't pay a bill because Krista retired. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a real tribal knowledge problem. And so that's where I spent about a year looking in the market for someone who could help with that part. And I just didn't find it. But that was right around when AI ML was coming out. So I thought, good use case, good problem, structured data. Yeah. So that was it. It was born out of this just frustration at a real world.
So you experienced the problem and it's like, I'm going to try to restate it to see if I got this. So it's that you're talking about, all the different account payable, and I'm not an accounts payable. I'm not an accountant.
It means you make good life choices. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we code? Like, what's the proper code? Like, what account do we put this bill under so that we are properly like understanding where our money is going out? Like all the cash cows.
I'll put a different face on it. So if you're a big real estate company, you own 100 big office buildings, XYZ real estate company, right? And you make a contract with a cleaning company that does 12 of your buildings. They're going to send a bill to XYZ cleaning company. I'll tell you, XYZ cleaning company is not paying that bill, right? Because XYZ cleaning company is backed by these investors and they're in these funds. And so they're going to push that expense down to those appropriate buildings. And they may say, okay, well, these 6 get a pro rata piece. Okay, I'm going to split it, 6 ways there. Well, this one's under construction. We have to cover all that cost. Well, these are their office buildings, and so these actually get passed through to the tenants. We have to put it in that tenant recovery pool, except for this one building where this one tenant negotiated. He doesn't want to pay. Oh,
man.
So it's very nuanced understanding. It's not just as simple as, hey, XYZ pays a bill. It's actually, and given the scope and scale, so Colony, we have 12,000 entities, right? 12,000 kind of distinct legal structures that it could be sent to. Then multiply that by the thousands of what ifs at the property level, and you end up with kind of millions of permutations of what it could be.
I can see how this could be a huge deal because each, like you described, each business or each building might be a completely different business case and treated differently and accounted differently. Do you have a sense? I mean, obviously, you realize the problem must be valuable because you experienced it, but do you have a sense of like what is the economic impact of miscoding or needing to do it manually?
Yeah. It's a great question because it's one of these things you start to peel the onion back because everyone at first like, oh, if you pay a bill, you send a check, everything's fine. But, first off, you might be interested to know almost, 60+% of every entry that hits the accounting world starts from paying a bill, paying an invoice. And so the majority of what's hitting your ledger for an accountant, for a CFO is coming from this process. There's just a pure, and it's particularly acute in real estate where there's like recovery, this pass through where the tenant actually pays it. If you're paying the stuff the tenant should pay, well, that's a massive impact on your bottom line, right? And or if you're charging too much and the tenants, are going to audit you and you got a problem on that side. So just the pure time spent, that knowledge it takes to learn, Krista learned over decades, right? That part alone, there's, it's 80% of AP folks' time is usually spent researching how this should be done. So it's a big impact there. But there's lots of downstream implications around accounting, finance, treasury, recovery, asset management, and so it is a massive impact across an organization, and even something like late fees, right? If you're doing it, there's a great example. Say a bill comes in for electric, $5,000 electric bill. Let me tell you, if you're a day late, the utility will charge a late fee. So a $5,500 bill comes in, it's $5,000 of electric, $500 late fee. The person who's overworked just puts it in as $5,500 electric. You pass it through. The CFO sees, oh, we had a little bit of variance in electricity.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh my gosh, there's $40,000 a month of late fees we're paying. Like, we shouldn't be doing that. We need to add a body to fix that problem. But it's just invisible because they don't know, right? And so having that proper granularity, we've seen that. We've seen companies where just because of overworked folks that don't have the time to do it right, they get in late, or then they don't know, and then the management team is not aware of that, where we can expose that and say, hey, look, here's an opportunity to save some value and some time. Let's pay these quicker so we don't have those late fees.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's sort of like the same issue you face whenever in your life you have to stare at a lot of data and make a decision. At some point, you start to wonder, what is this? Like, where did this come from? Is this correct? And then you dive and dive. And of course, at the end of the day, somewhere it's wrong. And you
exactly.
How important is that? And I can see how this particular use case, it's not as simple as, okay, we're going to reduce the human labor, because you're saying if we make better choices or we make better granularity, it could have a massive impact in terms of what kind of choices you could make as a leader who has to look at this. That's cool.
And not only that, it's like, where do you want your people spending time? Because in real estate, a lot of times, like say for multifamily or senior living, this is done on site because the knowledge is on site, right? I know I had that plumber fix this. I know I did that. It's kind of something that's interesting to think about in this AI realm we're in now. Is like, what do you want people actually doing? Well, do I want my in-house asset manager who's running this 300 apartment complex in the back room coding invoices? No, I want him out shaking hands, talking to residents, figuring out what's going on with that, making those personal connections. And so this really enables that shift of work away from back office, rote things into, I can do more value add stuff with that. So there's
with actual humans,
handshakes, right? Actual human contact. Yeah. So that's another aspect of the value is like, hey, you can get because the knowledge is now central, you could centralize it or pull off the plate. And then that actual human interaction becomes the priority, not just the stuff that has to get paid, that fixes that.
Well, I'm curious, especially, I love asking this question, which is, when you're first starting, there's a way that you grow, and then there's how you're growing now. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about how you got your very first customers versus what you're doing now to get new people to become aware of Predict AP?
Absolutely. That shift from the very start to being a real company is a huge shift. And something, where I'm always learning. And again, my role for the past 20 years was just like getting really obsessed about, I can't help but solve problems. It's kind of my personality. My wife loves it, right? She can never just tell me a problem to listen. I have to go solve it. So now it's how do I scale this? At the start, one thing for folks listening, always cultivate relationships. And by that, I mean, actually be there to help people when you need it. And so in the real estate world, there's this, Yardi's, this accounting software that's a predominant player. And I was always there to help people. I'm really into it. And so every year, I was always there to help people. So one of our first customers was actually this company called Bridge Investment Group. At Colony, we were audited by one of the big four. And the audit manager is this lady, Katie Elson, and she left. And so she would go through my systems and give me a tough time on, are we doing things properly, the controls and all that. But she was always impressed by the diligence we had. She left to go be the CFO at a really big company called Bridge Investment Group. So she shifted out of audit to more of the business side. And so, we kept in touch, talking about Yardi and other things. And then when I needed my first customer, I said, Katie, I've got this idea. Remember that thing you saw at Colony, like trying to make that a company? And she's like, sure, I'll give you a shot. And we got here's a few invoices. Let's see how you do. And we went ahead with some of the predominant industry players. We did great. And that grew into, tens of thousands of invoices a month. And so the original was, who do I know, right? Who have I built relationships with? Pick up the call for me. And let me tell you, when you turn into a software salesman, you know who your true friends are when they pick up the call versus the people who let it go to voicemail forever. But that stops at a certain point, right? And so then
you only have so many friends. It's like 150 is what the Dunbar's number, right? That's close relationships.
Exactly. And so after that, well, then you need a real machine to start to create this. I'm learning about all this top of funnel and content and how to cultivate it, how to get the word out, how to get the, understanding what we actually do instead of just saying AP automation, which could mean a lot of things, really honing in on our message. Who's our real, target customer? Who can we help? Getting that message from the leadership perspective, getting that message from the end user perspective. So we brought in a head of sales who started to create that, looking at tools we can apply, ways we can understand it, ways we can automate it. And just like we create automation around this invoice processing, we want our company to take advantage of automations too. So it's understanding, where can we use different modern tools to kind of punch above our weight as well. That's been a learning process of building out those systems and processes that let us be really efficient with the people we have and the time we have. Back to the whole, what do I want people doing? I want to be on a Zoom with a person, talking to them so I can see them and they can see me. I don't want to be creating, email threads and things like that, right? I want to use as many tools as I can.
Love it. Love it. So one of the things I'm curious about when I heard the solution is this something that only really applies for a company that has like a massive amount of holdings? Is it more aimed at enterprise, or are you also aiming more at mid-market to get kind of a wider portion of the TAM?
It's a good question. So the TAM's pretty large and it is fairly broken out. So obviously there's huge players as the whales. Mm-hmm. We have one of them, but they are a long cycle. It takes years. And so if we're sitting by waiting for that, I know we can fix it. But it takes a long time. So the neat thing about this architecture, and this is why I love that we started PredictAP when we did, as far as like how cloud works, how we can, buy, compute on demand for the moment we need it. We don't need to buy a server sitting there doing nothing. It makes it very economical. And so, yes, we have very large customers and we're built to scale to millions of invoices for customers. We have some customers that have a few hundred invoices a month, and it's the CFO that's doing that job. And we've architected this way that it's very cost effective. For a fraction of what it would cost them to hire one person, we can get in there and give them the same level of service as a multi-billion-dollar company has because of architecture. So Chris Antonesi is my technical head. He's actually a buddy of mine from college, or high school. Is a great story. COVID was starting. He's at Apple. He has some free time, and so I was able to to kind of get him into this problem and get into the layers and steal him away. And one of the ways I did that was saying, hey, let's build this architecture the right way. Let's not just build an MVP and build a bunch of debt and hope it fixes. Like, I gave him a year and the budget he wanted to do it right. And that lets us be economical on the small scale and the big scale. And so, we have customers that are a few hundred. Our average customer is kind of that mid-market. It probably has $1 billion to $2 billion in real estate, which sounds like a big number, but in real estate, it's not. It's,
real estate is expensive, so it's not that many assets.
Well, you're running 5,000 a month, and there's thousands of companies like that. And so that's kind of our target. But yes, this one's bigger, and I love the ones that are smaller. This one, one thing quick story, there's a customer of ours, they had 2 people doing this and one left. So there's an open position. They still do checks. So they said, hey, we have a check run every Friday. So 3-4 months after we're in there, they said, hey, we didn't need to backfill that position. We're doing our checks on Wednesday now, which has never happened in the last 10 years we've been doing this. And that woman who just did AP coding, she's been promoted to an accountant. So this is now a subtask of her overall bigger thing. And she's on this path to a better career, which is like, for me, that's like the chef's kiss of like, everyone's happy. The business is happy. It's more efficient. And this person's on a better trajectory for their career.
Yeah, earlier when you mentioned, this is kind of replacing a whole person's job or doing a job of a full-time employee. I'm curious because I've seen this in a lot of AI tools now. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that there's like an explosion of AI tools right now, and a lot of them are messaged that it's like cheaper than a person. They're messaging it like it's an employee. It's almost, that's how they're making it make sense to people. Instead of talking about the technical thing, they're like, look, our software is this. A full-time person would have been doing it and they would have cost you, $150K a year or whatever. Are you using similar messaging? Have you looked at the different ways to position it? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So I'll be the first to say AI is not a replacement for a person, period. It's not. People have judgment and AI does not. AI is the incredibly enthusiastic intern that wants to make you happy and will lie, cheat, and steal to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so you need a person in there to control it. What AI is a tool, right? Just like Microsoft Excel is a tool. Imagine, all the work around the world that's done in Excel. Yeah, we can do a lot more with less with that, but you still need people. And so I think where we're finding opportunity is that, hey, these are folks, this back office operations haven't had good tools. We're now giving them good tools. There are definitely use cases where AI cannot make that right choice, right? Brand new vendors, brand new situations, when vendors doing something tricky, when there's a nuance or there's not a pattern, right? And there's something to figure out or negotiate or settle. That's where the people have an advantage that AI will never have. But what we're finding is it is a tool that augments staff so staff can do way more and expand back to that point of what do you want people doing, expand into areas of more personal connection where there tends to be more value add. as opposed to just data entry. So yes, we're replacing data entry, but yes, we're enabling, more higher value tasks that are more fulfilling and help the company more, right? Looking for new discounts,
Yeah.
getting discounts, consolidating vendor spend, understanding when a vendor changed from the $100 an hour they used to be charging to $200 an hour. You have time to go call them on that, things like that. So it's not a replacement, it's an augmentation.
Yeah. So you're positioning it as we're making everyone have like, what's the right word? It's like you're letting them have higher leverage activities because all this low level stuff is taken care of and they have now the bandwidth to go talk to customers, to make more strategic choices. Well, what are you the most excited about if we look at like the future of Predict AP for 2025? Like what are you aiming for at the end of the year?
Yeah, so just continuing to figure out how to help our customers more. So we have this very narrow, deep focus on real estate. It's a big TAM, and it's incredibly complicated. So we have some distance there between the competition. We have the patent on the concept of it, which is good. We were definitely a first mover, not just a wrapper that's coming on later.
Yeah.
We're moving more into what I'll call data insights. Back to that example of that utility bill with a late fee. Oftentimes, and again, these things happen because I've yet to see a company where there's more staff than is needed to run, right? People are just busy and little compromises are made to close the books and do things in the time that they're given. We have this ability to look across all this activity and pull out things that might be of interest, might be, by themselves be small and immaterial, but in aggregate could be material. I remember the story from November, December last year where Macy's had a $150 million restatement of earnings because some accountant was booking something wrong, right? And it got through workflow and it got through audit, and it got me thinking about what if there's consistent patterns that are not optimal, we'll say. And once it hits that accounting ledger, well, it's invisible now because those numbers are in there and my budget versus actual looks fine and all that. But we have the ability to kind of be a full second set of resources that look at all these things. And so pulling out those data insights, I talked about the utility late fee one. Another one that we saw at a senior living was labor is a big component of cost at senior living. If someone hire a bunch of temp labor to backfill, they didn't want to explain a budget variance why they went over budget. So maybe they spent a little less marketing. Maybe they booked that labor to marketing. Then maybe 4 months later, you have a revenue problem because you didn't spend the marketing. And you're trying to figure out my revenue problem. And it's really hard because it's really hidden as to what that real thing was. So our ability to say, oh, what this marketing expense or labor expense got booked to marketing, you didn't really spend your marketing, maybe you should look at that. And so our ability to kind of pull out these interesting insights and feed them up to the people that want to know, the asset managers or accountants or CFOs, that's a really interesting next step around kind of looking at that raw data to understand issues potentially.
I love that. And I'm sure, just like you said, once you find, at least my experience, like if you look, you're going to find problems. And then once you find a problem, that must occur many times in the space. So you're going to be able to find these patterns of, these are the kinds of errors that they make. And I'm sure each one of those is going to have a specific kind of like ROI. If we find that problem, we can save you, whatever percent, which is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. And not necessarily that everyone has to solve every single problem and make that, and sometimes you understand and you accept compromise. That's fine. I think what is scary is if you don't know that you're accepting compromise at a C-level. And so that's our thing. We have to try to figure out how to do this in a way where we acknowledge of course you can't have perfect information on everything, but you can have at least intention around what you're compromising on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah.